Hey guys, Kelly with St. Johns County Parks and Recreation, and I am here today to talk to you guys about owls. So, who is ready to learn about owls today? First things first, who I am, where I work. I work for St. Johns County. St. Johns County is a long linear county that runs from Ponte Vedra down to Marineland, over to the Hastings area and up into Fruit Cove. We are bordered on one side by the Atlantic Ocean and by the other side by the St. Johns River. We run a huge wide variety of habitats, and so we have a few owl species that also live in these habitats. Specifically within the county, I work for our Parks and Recreation Department. Hopefully, during this shutdown, you have been able to get out and enjoy our parks. We have 42 miles of beach that are open to enjoy for really safe social distancing activities. We have ball fields, we have tennis courts, we have trails, we have waterway access. So our parks have become a key part of our life if they weren't already during this pandemic. I know I've been out there enjoying some of the parks I don't usually get to enjoy as part of my job. And my job is Parks Naturalist. So I have one of the coolest jobs ever. I get to educate people about our amazing natural areas here in the state of Florida. And so I get to take people kayaking and beach walks. I get to work in our natural parks and kind of go off trail doing surveys. I also get to bring educational programs and talks to people. Normally I'm in person, and sometimes depending on what the talk is, I get to bring animals with me, as pictured here with me with an alligator. Now, even if this talk was in person, I don't have access to an owl to bring to you during the presentation, but I hope you enjoyed today's presentation all the same. So first things first, we know that owls are birds, but let's just talk about a few things that make birds birds. What kinds of characteristics do they have that make them characterized as birds as opposed to reptiles or mammals or amphibians or insects? So I want you to think and see how many of the following things you can get. What types of things are unique to birds? What types of things do all birds have in common? Give you a second to think about that. Okay, ready? So the first thing I hope all of you got, it's one of the most obvious answers, they all have feathers, right? All mammals have hair, all birds have feathers. They also have some form of a beak. Some of them are really long and big like a toucan. Some of them are really short and tiny. Some of them are used like a spoonbill as a spoon. There's lots of really unique beaks in the animal kingdom. They have wings, and they all have two wings. Just because they have wings does not mean they can fly. So can anybody think of a bird species that has wings but cannot fly? There's a couple examples. The most notable is the penguin. They lay eggs. Now, just because a bird lays eggs does not mean it lays eggs in a nest in a tree. We have birds that lay eggs in cavities of old dead trees. We have birds right now here in St. Johns County that are nesting on our beaches. So they literally just do a little scrape in the sand and deposit eggs there. So your typical nest that you think of when you think of bird that's high up in a tree and made of twigs or grasses, there's a lot more in the animal kingdom as far as bird nests. They're warm-blooded like you and I, so just like we eat to maintain internal body temperature, they also eat to maintain internal body temperature. And something I do want to point out is they all have lungs, and they have specialized lungs that assist in the ability to fly, and their lungs are really cool. I could spend a whole bunch of time on their heart and their lungs, but you can look that up on your own time if I've intrigued you. All right, so now in the bird world, there's lots of different kinds of birds. We've got songbirds, we have raptors, we have hawks, we have parrots, right? We have these kind of categories and groupings of birds. So my question to you is, now that we have established what makes a bird, how do we distinguish the different types of birds? So what makes an owl an owl? I want you to think about it. What kinds of characteristics are unique to our owl species? All right, hopefully you at least have a couple of answers. You ready to see what I got? They are silent flyers. They're so quiet, so their wings are specially adapted so that they don't really make noise as they fly through the sky, which is pretty incredible. They have humongous eyes. Now, this helps for some of our nocturnal owl species, and they can't move their eyes. So their eyes are so big that I can keep my head in facing one direction. I can move my eyes, right? I can look up, I can look down, I can look left, I can look right without moving my head. If they want to look in any other direction than they're looking, they have to physically rotate their neck, which is part of the reason that their neck is able to rotate 270 degrees, because that's the only way they can see different areas within their environment. They have exceptional hearing. And something that's really cool with their hearing is that their ears are actually asymmetrical. So they have one ear that's slightly higher than the other, and this allows sound to hit the ears at slightly different times. And this gives owls a huge advantage in hunting because it allows them to get a better picture of what's going on in their surroundings. And they are, lastly, birds of prey. So they fall in the same kind of category as hawks and as eagles and as osprey. They are out there, they are carnivores, they are looking for meat, and they are very effective hunters. So I want to show you this video that demonstrates how silent they are in flight. Good girl.
Oh, jeez. Mo.
And now, it's Kenz's turn. Shh.
You guys hear that difference? So that first one was the pigeon, the second one was a different bird of prey, and then we had the owl. And you could distinctly hear the first two birds and them flapping and flying through the sky, and the owl was completely silent. And they use this to their advantage when they're hunting because it allows them to sneak up on their prey. Now I have another video that shows you their ability to rotate their neck about 270 degrees. It's a little creepy, I'll forewarn you, but kind of cool. Watch this owl. Okay, in case you missed that, I'm gonna start it from the beginning so you can see this owl rotate his head. It's literally just like on a swivel. It's super cool, slightly creepy. What make owls really neat, I guess. And kind of if you put some of these characteristics together, it gives you a good idea of how they hunt and why they're such good predators. So I want to show you this video of the great horned owl hunting.
This is the great horned owl's time. He's one of the largest and most powerful owl species in America. As dusk turns to dark, he looks down into a forest clearing. His eyes are tuned for optimal night vision. But more importantly, he listens. His ear-like horns are simply tufts of feathers. No one knows for sure what they're for, but they have nothing to do with hearing. His real ears are hidden under his head feathers. They're positioned asymmetrically. The right one is slightly higher than the left one. Sound reaches one ear a fraction of a second later than the other. That gives him incredible accuracy, pinpointing the source. A faint rustling in the dead leaves. It's another nighttime hunter, a deer mouse. He's patrolling the leaf litter, looking for bugs and seeds. The owl hasn't quite keyed in on the sounds, but a turn of the head changes that. Its head spins a full 270 degrees, 3/4 of a full rotation. His ears tell his light-sensitive eyes exactly where to look. His two main senses are in sync. Target locked. Now, the owl unleashes another secret weapon. Fringed wing feathers that muffle any flapping sound. It's a double advantage. The owl can still hear its prey while flying, and the mouse doesn't have a clue what's coming. And probably never knew what hit him. Keeping itself fed rules a bird's daily life.
You guys see how they just swallowed it whole? So they'll regurgitate whatever they can't digest, typically bones and fur, and that will make an owl pellet. So you can typically tell if you have an owl nest nearby, if you look around the tree or around the area that you think you have an owl nest, and you'll see these pellets around the tree from where they've regurgitated what they can't digest. All right, so now that we've gone over some of the characteristics of owls, kind of what makes an owl, I want to know if you know how many different species of resident owls are there in Florida. So what I mean by resident is they live here year round, they nest here. There's a handful of species of owls that will occasionally visit Florida. Who wouldn't want to? It's beautiful here, but we only have a certain number of ones that live here all year round. So take a look. Your options are A, 10, B, 5, or C, 3. How many do we have here in Florida? Look, take a guess, and the answer is 5. We have 5 species of owls here in the state of Florida. Here are the 5 species. We have the barred owl, the barn owl, the eastern screech-owl, the great horned owl, and the burrowing owl. Now, before I talk about them, I have a couple of vocab terms I just want to go over because I'll be utilizing them to describe the different owl species and kind of what differentiates them. So the big thing is nocturnal, diurnal, and crepuscular. So the first one you're probably very familiar with, and most people think that all owl species are nocturnal, meaning they're active at night. And that's not true. We have several species of owl that are either diurnal or crepuscular in the United States, depending on where they live and what their habits are and what they're eating. So not all owls are nocturnal. Then there's diurnal, which is basically a normal human, right? When the sun goes down, we get ready for bed, we sleep through the night, and we're active during the day when the sun is out. There's a couple owl species that will exhibit this behavior. And then there's crepuscular. So this may be a new word to you, but it basically means that they are active right around dusk and dawn. So right around when the sun is rising and right around when the sun is setting. And so they kind of have these 2 shifts in the day that they're most active. So in the heat of the day, in the middle of the day, they're somewhere hiding, sleeping. And in the middle of the night, when it's dark, they're also somewhere hiding, sleeping. It's kind of those end caps of the beginning and the end of the day that they are most active. All right, so we are going to play a game as we go through and talk about these species called Who Am I? I know, clever. I got plenty of owl puns, people. Keep them coming for you. So I'm going to play an owl call, an owl sound, and you're going to tell me, who am I? All right, here comes your first one. You ready? All right, this is probably one of the most common ones that you're going to hear. I tend to hear this one right before sunset, if that gives you any clues. So your options are all of the owl species, because we haven't gone over any of them yet. So we have the barred owl, the barn owl, the eastern screech owl, or the great horned owl, or the burrowing owl. So take your pick. I'll play it one more time for you, and then you can tell me what. All right, do you have your guess? And the answer is barred owl. That is our barred owl. That is one of the most common owls that I see here in this area, and one of the most common owls I hear in this area. Like I said, really tend to hear it around sunset. All right, so now you'll know when you hear that, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you? That is a barred owl. Excuse me. These guys are found in the eastern half of the United States. They're approximately 18 inches tall. They're most active at dusk and dawn. So what word was dusk and dawn? Do you guys remember? Crepuscular. So maybe that's a new word for you today. Our barred owls are crepuscular. They're active at dusk and dawn. These guys eat a lot of small mammals, your rats, your rodents. They like to live in woods and forested areas. I hear them a lot at sunset around Hollows Cove and Trout Creek when we're kayaking. I've also heard them around sunset at Canopy Shores and Vail Point. If you haven't checked out my coworker's nighttime owl walks, owl prowls that he has in our parks, or sunset symphonies at Waxahachie, I highly recommend it. He's really good. He has a great ear for owls, and he knows a bunch about owls as well. So if you want to go experience these owl calls in person, check out those owl prowls. These guys are a cavity nester slash nest grabber. So what that means is they will nest in cavities in trees if they can find one that's large enough. But if there's a nest that's an eagle's nest or a hawk's nest or an osprey nest that's easy enough to just go ahead and grab and utilize, they will do that as well. All right, so we got the first one down. Let's see if you can get the next one. All right, you ready for the next? Who am I? Here we go. All right, did you get a good feel for what that was? So did I try to trick you? And it's actually another barred owl. Or is it a barn owl, an eastern screech owl, a great horned owl, or a burrowing owl? I'll play it one more time for you. All right, I hope you have your selections, and the answer is a great horned owl. So these guys have one of the largest ranges of any of the owls that we will talk about. They are found throughout the continental United States, up into Mexico, or down into Mexico and up into Canada. They're also the largest owl. So these guys can get to be just over 24 inches tall. So that's a 2-foot owl. That's pretty big for a bird. It hunts at night. So this is your typical nocturnal owl that you would think of. These guys tend to utilize a nest of other larger birds. So they're not as keen on making their own nest. They're not really cavity nesters. They want to go steal a nest from someone else who's already done the work. They utilize a wide variety of habitats, which is why they can be found across the continental United States and Mexico and Canada, right? Because there's tons of habitats from the desert to the forest to the swamps, and they are not as picky about where they live. They'll inhabit any of those areas if there's enough prey to eat on. And they tend to eat the largest amount of prey, which makes sense because they're the largest owl. So they'll sometimes go after rabbits or other hawks or other owls. They'll go after snakes. They've been known to go after porcupines and skunks. So they're humongous owls, and they, with their call, we consider that a hoot, as a typical owl would do. All right, so now that we've got great horned owl down, let's see the next one. All right, you ready for the next who am I? Okay, so now is a great time to point out that not all owls hoot. Some of them shriek and shriel and scream. Not at all sounding like your storybook typical hooting. So does this shriek belong to the barred owl, the barn owl, the eastern screech owl, the great horned owl, or the burrowing owl? Odds are, if you've been listening to my presentation, you can probably take 2 of those off the list. So you've got a 33% chance of getting this right if you're just guessing. I will play the sound for you one more time before I show you who it is. Okay, and now that sound will haunt you in your sleep, that is our barn owls. So these guys aren't as prevalent as the barred owls or as the great horned owls. They pretty much are found in Florida and a skinny part up the east coast of the United States. And then they kind of go over through Louisiana and Texas, and then they kind of spread out some more once they get into California and Oregon and Washington. But they're really not found in the middle part of the United States. These guys can get to be about 14 inches tall, so just over a foot, and they're often found nesting in buildings like barns, hence why they get the name barn owls. Hunters were known, or not hunters, farmers are known to think of these as great and good luck because they kept lots of mice and rodents out of their barns. When in churches and other structures, due to that shriek that they let out, they tend to be seen as a bad omen and scary and bad luck because it sounds like something out of a horror movie. And in case you forgot what it sounds like, I'm going to play it for you again. Okay, so now that you've committed that, these guys are nocturnal. So they are active at night, that typical owl trait that you think of, and they eat so many mice. That's predominantly their diet, mice and rats. They can eat over 1,000 mice a year. A single owl can eat up to 1,000 mice a year. And these guys like habitats where they're kind of on the edge of open areas, which makes sense that they're in farms, right? Because farms typically have these wide open pastures and prairies, but there's edges that are a little more forested. So they like to have buildings or forested areas that they can kind of sit on top and perch and look around the open areas and utilize that open area to hunt. All right, you ready for the next who am I? So if you've been paying attention, 3 of the options are gone. So you have a 50-50 shot at this next one. This one just makes me laugh. It's so cute. So this is either your barred owl, barn owl, or great horned owl, because I'm trying to trick you. Or it's your eastern screech owl or burrowing owl. So take your pick of those 2. I'm going to play it for you one more time. Now that you've got that sound down, the answer is the eastern screech-owl. This guy's tiny. He's pretty much the tiniest owl that we have here. They're approximately 8 inches tall. They're found in the mid and eastern United States. So they're missing from some of the states off of the Pacific part of the United States, but more or less the entire east coast of the United States up just past the Mississippi River. These guys are crepuscular, so they hunt at dusk and dawn. and they nest in tree cavities. So they will find abandoned areas that maybe got too big for like a woodpecker that they can fit into, and they'll utilize those tree cavities as homes. Now, unlike a lot of the other owl species that we talk about that predominantly eat rodents, these guys do eat rodents, but they also have a healthy diet of insects as well. They have a mixed variety of habitats, which is once again why they can cover such a vast area of land in the United States. And they don't have that typical owl hoot. So I will play their call for you one more time. All right, it's our last one. Hopefully you've been listening. If you haven't, just take a guess. But here's our last. Who am I? So that little call actually belongs to the burrowing owl, also known as a coot. These guys are also really tiny owls. Now, we don't have them here in St. Johns County in the Northeast Florida region. These guys are going to be found pretty much from Central to South Florida in sporadic patches. One of the most notable is on the island of Cape Coral. They have tons of burrowing owls. And these guys actually change their seasonalities of when they hunt depending on what season they're in. So if they're in breeding season, they're actually really active during the day, making them diurnal. If it's not breeding season, they're active at night, making them nocturnal. Now, they have the ability to dig their own burrow, but a lot of times they will utilize old gopher tortoise burrows. So gopher tortoises are my favorite, and if you haven't checked out some of the videos of Augie and I, please take some time to do that. Augie is our educational gopher tortoise here in St. Johns County, and anytime I get a chance to talk about him, I do, because he's adorable. But it's another testament to how important gopher tortoises are, because this is one of the 350 species of one of 350 species that utilize gopher tortoise burrows. And so these guys also can use armadillo burrows, and they are found in Western United States and Mexico as well. So some of them actually utilize burrows from other animals in other parts of the United States, like when they're in open prairies, and they'll actually use prairie dog burrows. So any kind of underground tunnel that another animal makes, they'll utilize. Once again, they can dig their own burrow, but if there's one already made, they'll just move right on in. And these guys have a diet primarily of insects. They will eat small rodents and reptiles, but more or less they're out there hunting for insects, and they have that cooing sound, unlike our traditional hoot for an owl. All right, now, I know we don't have burrowing owls here, but they have a lot of personality and super cute. And I think we all need a little more positivity and happiness and joy in the world right now. And so I would just like you to take a moment. We're all going to sit back and watch these burrowing owls dancing.
I'm coming through like the mortar you don't have. I'm flipping from the right then and flipping from the left. This beat.
I love the end where the owl's like over it and it just bites the camera. If you are now intrigued, there is a part 2 to the burrowing owl dance off on YouTube that I encourage you to go look up for a fun little laugh. Because who doesn't want to watch owls dance? All right, so one last fun trivia question for you, trying to keep it light and fun here. Do any of you know what a group of owls are called? So, like a group of dolphins are called a pod. A group of crows are called a murder. So, what is a group of owls called? Is it called a flock, a pandemonium, or a parliament? Take your guess, A, B, or C. Let's see. Here's the beauty of doing this virtually is I can't see how many you guys are getting wrong. So I'm just going to pretend like you all are super smart and you've gotten them all right so far. Let's see. The answer is a parliament of owls. Very formal. A pandemonium is actually a group of parrots. Fun facts for the day. So how can we help owls? There's three really big things that we can do. And first and foremost is to avoid pesticides and rodenticides. So when owls eat rodents that have been poisoned, they become poisoned. It's a huge problem to not only owls, but a lot of birds of prey. And owls are natural pest control, right? This one owl can eat up to 1,000 rodents a year, one owl. So if we can keep them around and keep them healthy, there's really no use for these chemicals to get rid of our rat problems. And in pesticides, with some of those birds that eat insects, kind of the same idea. They're eating things that are poisoned, and so that makes them poisoned. And so when we utilize these chemicals and these products, we just need to be mindful of how they might move up the food chain and what kind of impact they may have. Never, ever, ever feed any wild animals. If you've listened to any of my talks before, it's like one of my biggest pet peeves. We have no reason to feed any of these animals. They have been here for a long time hunting and figuring out how to exist in our world, and there is no need for us to be feeding them, and we definitely don't need to be feeding owls. And limit your use of recorded calls. So sometimes when people are birding, they will play calls in order to hear animals call back. But if we all did that, we would be really distracting to a lot of the wildlife in their forms of communication, especially in the owl world. Mating pairs will communicate back and forth to each other. They will communicate with their young. And we really don't want to disturb that line of communication. We also don't want to prevent them from hunting because they're busy communicating with whatever call we're putting out there. So just sit outside, hear what you can hear, and enjoy, the sounds of nature naturally. Some things that you can do to attract owls, avoid yard lights. That's really more for our nocturnal species. We want to keep things nice and dark for them. They like to have access to water nearby. So a bird bath is great not only for owls, but other birds. Leave some of those dead branches bare and leave some of those dead trees up if you can. So if you have branches or trees in areas in which if they fall, they won't harm anything, they won't cause property damage, leave them up. We talked about how some of these owl species are cavity nesters. Well, you can't get cavities unless you have big trees, and usually you have to have dead trees to get a lot of the cavities that these guys nest in. So, leave the big dead trees. They're called snags, and they're good for other things like woodpeckers. And then leave some of those dead branches or bare branches that may not look as good because they're awesome roosting sites for these owls to kind of sit up high and get a view of everything going on around them. So if you can't keep the big hollow trees, maybe you just, have something where if it were to fall, it would cause property damage. There are owl nest boxes you can get, and depending on the type of owls you want to attract, it will determine how big they need to be, which makes sense. So you can look into that. And then let a part of your yard go natural to attract prey. So one of the things that we talk about throughout a lot of my teachings are keeping our yards a little more native and a little more natural to attract wildlife. And so that's something to think about. We obviously don't want to attract a bunch of rodents closer to home, but maybe if we had a beautiful native garden, we would attract a lot of insects that we would want, that the owls that would also want to eat. All right, guys, it's been a hoot. I will see you later. I hope you have enjoyed today's presentation. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to put them below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. I can't wait till I can deliver these in person, but until then, I will see you on the screen. Till next time, bye, guys.